Hello everyone and welcome to episode 56 of the Nurtured by Nature podcast. Today I'm delighted to be joined in conversation by Megan Edge, a healer, educator and author based in Canada. In this fascinating conversation, Megan and I dive into a beautiful diversity of topics. Her background and interest in geology leads us to consider the timelines of nature and the story of Mother Earth that is written in the rocks. She also draws our awareness to the pervasive ways that our perception of the weather and equally the natural world is managed through a constant propaganda that is highly censored and curated by design to keep us afraid, disconnected and disempowered. Megan shares some simple steps we can all take to reclaim our connection to the world and develop a healthy cynicism towards what the media is presenting to us as fact, and encourages us to delve into earlier books and studies that are treasure troves of wisdom. Megan also explains how she found complete healing from fibromyalgia through diet and nature's healing plants, and as a result passionately encourages people to advocate for their own health and to reconnect and have autonomy over their bodies. We must remember the change we want to see starts with us as individuals. The world needs you to bring your heart back online, to heal your story and to help co-create the healing story for the world. Welcome Megan, and thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of the Nurtured by Nature podcast. I'm really looking forward to talking to you. We've had some great emails back and forth in preparation for our conversation, so I know we're going to have some amazing things to talk about and share with the listeners. But just to get us started, I always just ask my guests to share a little bit about their nature story and really how nature has been a part of your life. So that if there's anything you'd like to share to get us started, that'd be lovely.
Sure, and thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm really looking forward to this and to our conversation. Yes. So my nature story, well, I would say I was born into nature. I was born into a foraging family, and I'm so grateful that that was my upbringing. Any opportunity that we had as I was growing up, we would go out as a family and we would forage through the forests and along the beaches and, in the meadows.
Oh, wow.
We've always, even when we lived in big cities like Montreal or Toronto, we always made a point to get out of the city. Where I live now, I'm right in nature all the time. The ocean is 2 blocks away. We've got parks. The forest is a 10-minute drive in every direction.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's been my whole life. And having grown up in a foraging family, from being, as soon as I could walk, I was the one tasked with finding the mushrooms underneath the salal, that my parents couldn't see. They were so tall. And before that, even my parents talk about how they would put me on their back and take me out into the forest when it was mushroom season or blackberry picking or whatever it was. So it's always been a part of my life. And in fact, it wasn't until very recently when I was on another podcast and the host asked me, "What is foraging?" And I realized, oh gosh, not everybody has, I mean, I know not everybody grew up the way that I grew up, but it hadn't really occurred to me the way that I'm immersed in it here. And by here, I'm on the west coast of Canada in Victoria, British Columbia. Here, it's part of conversations with most people. But I've come to appreciate that it's not everyone's experience, and lots of people don't have a clue what foraging is, just simply because it hasn't been presented to them as an option of a way to...
I would never, I mean, again, similar to you, I think it's become much more sort of apparent and more mainstream in recent years. I think it's moved a lot into our restaurant industry here as well. So a lot of chefs and things are, kind of really promoting that idea of, using natural ingredients, going out, getting things that are local to where their restaurants are. So yeah, it's sometimes we have to take that step back, don't we? And remember that actually, not everyone, particularly people perhaps who live in the more urban environments, but equally people can be in rural environments and they just didn't have that exposure, did they, to people? So it's
And in fact, I've come across people who are quite frankly afraid to go for a walk in the forest or to pick anything up off the beach because they've been taught that those are not safe environments, which breaks my heart because it's so not true. And in fact, I had a friend just recently who I go foraging with tell me that she'd read an article that had been put out, and who knows if it was put out by AI or an actual person, that it's dangerous to walk in the forest because there's a fungus that can get into your lungs and cause respiratory illness.
Oh my goodness.
I've never heard of this before.
No.
I was so shocked and saddened when I
Yeah.
heard that somebody or some AI technology is perpetuating this idea that going outside is
Yeah.
bad for your health when really it's the best thing that you can do
Well,
for your health.
I was gonna say, particularly in the forest. I mean, I had a fantastic guest quite a while ago now, Lindsay, and she does forest bathing, and we were talking about all the incredible benefits of being in, particularly in the forest, because that's what they were referring to, and the health benefits that are just immense. So yeah, it is really sad. I think it talks of our disconnect, really, doesn't it, from the world around us, and how our society has just literally sort of separated ourselves from nature, unfortunately, over, well, many, many generations.
Yes, yeah. Well, at least since the Industrial Revolution, that has had a huge impact, and we're still feeling the sort of the vibration of the mentality in the Industrial Revolution
Yeah,
in the sort of Western part of the world, and then the global impact that phenomenon really, if you think about it. I mean, the pace of construction, the pace of development, the pace of technology, and how quickly natural spaces were just paved over
yeah,
in the name of progress. And then with this like religious idea that God gave us the earth, and so it's ours to do with what we want and what we
yeah,
will, and that
yeah,
we have dominion over everything. That is such a damaging message, but it's still such a part of our psyche, and certainly in the industrial arena, that is very much a part of the mentality, and it's devastating for the planet. Thankfully, there are lots of people who
yeah.
think differently, like you and I.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's sort of that classic pendulum swinging, isn't it? Of like, we sort of had these discoveries, and we kind of, a bit of childlike really in our responsibility with them as well, is that, we've just sort of run full force into it without really considering some of the consequences. And I think, people have been sounding the alarm for a very long time. Actually, it's quite shocking when you look back and you read some of the things that were, back in like the 60s and 70s, and it's but we are seeing now this momentum of people beginning to like really actually step up and wanting to see the real changes, and actually changing our relationship with the world around us, realizing that we're not in this hierarchical society where we're gods of the natural world, as it were, and we can just use it and abuse it and exploit it with no repercussion. So I think it is I look at that as a sort of exciting time to be alive. There is a lot of weight of responsibility, which I think many of us who care about nature do at times struggle to bear and
Mm.
find it quite a burden. But I think it is also, I do try to come back to remembering that, we are able to write the future. It isn't already written, and we have to remember to write the future that we want, rather than just get sucked along to the sort of doom and gloom.
Well, absolutely. And this is where the sort of the longer term perspective becomes really important. So instead of falling into this apocalyptic thinking about the end of the world, and the sky is falling rhetoric, is to come back to an understanding of the history of the planet, the history of the earth. And the history of the earth is written in the stones. It's written in the lava flows. It's written in the sediments. I have a background in geology, and so I'm one of those armchair geologists. But what I loved about studying geology was the perspective of the longevity and the resilience of this incredible planet that we get to live on.
Yeah,
And it seems to me to be the height of human arrogance to assume that we would have the ability to destroy this planet. Bigger things than us, scarier things than us have come out of the sky or come up out of the earth and have wreaked havoc on the earth as it was at the time that was happening. And yet the Earth is still here. The Earth has been through so many ice ages, for example. At one point, geologists believed that the entire planet was encased in ice.
Yeah, wow.
Right? We've had mass extinctions on a level that we can't even begin to imagine. And the length of time that we think the Earth has been here, evolving and growing and having plants on it and having animals on it and having people on it, we keep pushing back that date, 4 billion years, 4.5 billion years, 5 billion years. Who can even conceive of 5 billion years? Most people can't
No.
conceive last week, or their grandparents' lives, never mind, 4 billion years. So when we start talking about, the climate is changing, or we're having floods, or we're having this, that, and the other thing, talk to your grandparents and ask them what the weather was like when they were children, or talk to someone like myself. Like, I'm 55. Right now, I'm sitting here in the middle of a big windstorm. It's November. This is what happens in November. We have big windstorms, but the last decade, we haven't had as many big windstorms as we had 2 decades ago.
Yeah.
But we're in an El Nino. I mean, this is the other thing that people aren't taught and they don't think of, because humans seem to have such short-term memories, at least modern humans do. We have cycles, nature cycles,
Yeah.
right? So we're in an El Nino. In my part of the world, when we have an El Nino, and an El Nino, for those who aren't familiar with it, these are circulations of the oceans that create what's either called an El Nino or an El Nino, and weather patterns are subject to these ocean currents that then create currents in the atmosphere. I mean, this is a very simplistic
Yeah.
explanation, but essentially that's what happens. So we get more rain, we get more wind, we get more snow. The temperatures drop when we're in an El Nino in this part of the world. But what am I hearing on the Weather Channel? This is the worst windstorm we've ever had. And even the language is changing. This
Yeah.
was predicted to be a bomb cyclone.
Oh no. Yeah. Oh, you get them too. We get bombs as well. We get...
It's a windstorm. Why are we, making it, why are we scaring people, basically?
Yeah.
And this whole idea that we want to help people connect back to nature as a healing practice, a healing modality, as just remembering who we are and where we came from. And then we've got the sky's falling, chickens with their heads cut off, people making people afraid of the weather, of the climate, of
Yeah.
outdoors.
I think that's the biggest thing, isn't it? Is just this like propagation of fear. It's not to say that, there are more extremes and we are seeing changes and things do need to be done, but it is this like, this immense fear messaging that is just overwhelming for people. And yeah, they're just like you said, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because it does feel like it is an attempt to alienate us even further from nature, isn't it? It's really like, an us and them scenario, and it's like sort of pitting it against each other, and we're enemies really, and again, it's not there to support us. And I'd never
mm,
really sort of come down on it in quite that sort of thought process before, but that really is an interesting concept of how the messaging really makes us feel very, I suppose, well, again, it's disconnected, disempowered, isn't it, by
mhm.
by this?
That's right. And I think the first stage in anyone reconnecting to nature is to become cognizant of the messaging and the branding and the
Yeah.
politicizing of natural cycles. And we're seeing this now in the mainstream. This is no longer a conspiracy theory, quote unquote. We've got people like Bill Gates who have agendas of dimming the sun
Yeah.
to cool the planet. I'm sorry, Bill, you're not God. You're not even a scientist. You're not a climatologist. What is going on here? Who are you?
Yeah.
And your governments, my governments, they're on board with this. And we're seeing it in the skies. We're seeing the planes flying over. This is not unknown. This has been going on for a long time, seeding of the clouds and all of that. It's now
Yeah.
starting to leak into the mainstream. Because these are people who are doing this, people can undo it, right? That's the
Yeah.
message that I would want to give to somebody who's do your research, find out what Bill Gates is up to, and then question the validity of these ideas, these practices, this politicizing of nature, and start reclaiming your relationship with the natural world, with the plants in your neighborhood, with the plants on your deck if you've got them, or your backyard. If you're able to, go out into a forest and walk through it and feel what comes up for you as you do that. That so the first step is the becoming cognizant of what we're being shown and what we're being given, and a lot of it's subtle and a lot of it's very pervasive and very hypnotic. Get yourself out of that hypnotism, give your head a shake, and question everything that you're being told from a healthy place of skepticism, and then build your relationship
Yeah, I
with.
think that's really interesting. And I wonder if it's just harder for people who perhaps, unlike us, didn't have that relationship with nature as children. Because I get frustrated, shall we say, with people because I've got horses now, and so that means I'm outside for multiple hours every single day because they're not in a yard. I look after them completely on my own. I had sheep for about 10 years as well, so it was like I don't know, you're just very much more aware of the weather patterns and the environment, and even reading the weather, and there'll be times when you'll look at the sky and you go, oh, that that looks like snow, or that it, or you can smell like, oh, it smells like rain, and then you're like looking at the weather app and it's like, oh no, there's zero chance of rain, and then it rains. And I don't know if it perhaps that's part of the problem, is it is harder if you haven't got that, like, sort of experience of your own to draw on to sort of be more aware of these things. But it's, I think that's the thing, isn't it? You need to start getting out in nature, like, and just getting, like you said, go for a walk in the forest, just, start to connect with this amazing web of life that is around us and the incredible knowledge that is there for us to tap into. I mean, I love that it's one of the things I was so excited about talking to you, because you shared a bit of your background in geology, and it is a fascinating subject. And I think it's something that not many people have really studied and been aware of. And I know I loved your description of it, saying it's the story of the earth. And I just thought, I've never really thought of that like that. But I know, like, when we go to the sort of coast around here and you can see the exposed cliffs and you can see all the sort of layers of sediment, and it is really fascinating. I mean, my partner loves it. He'll stand there for like hours, like sort of looking at little things. And it does just remind you. I think that's the big thing for nature for me, is it's just a reminder that, like, we're quite small in both time and stance in the world, and it just sort of gives you that different perspective. I think that's what it comes down to, isn't it? It's perspective.
Absolutely. And just as you're talking, I'm hearing that saying, it's nothing's written in stone. But in fact, actually, yes, lots of things are written in stone. In fact, the whole history of the earth is written in the
Yeah,
stones if you know how to read it. And if you can understand, to some, like, whatever the capacity that a person can understand, the length of time as we have constructed it, that has been involved in the Earth's creation and the Earth's evolution, because as humans, especially as I said in the Western world, we seem to have such a narrow
yeah,
ability to visualize anything bigger than ourselves or anything greater than ourselves. We see the world around us as static,
yeah,
right? And we get very excited and agitated when things seem to change, right? We can't have change. Well, but hang on a second. That's what the earth is. That's what life is. Life is about change, things changing. So when you're in tune with the seasons and you watch how in springtime, the flowers come up and the trees start to bud out and the leaves get greener and greener, and then you move into summer and everything is lush, well, depending on where you live and depending on if you have four seasons or two, but
yeah,
you get my point.
yeah,
And then this time of year in the Western Hemisphere, we're going into winter, and so the winds are blowing and the leaves are falling, and everything is growing or decaying. It's growing or it's dying. And even as it's dying, other things are growing up around it. And that rhythm, those cycles, when we're in tune with them, at least I feel when I'm in tune with them, when I start paying attention, I get out of my busy head and I look out the window. It's so calming for me.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on out there. That's the other thing. There, when you really look at what's happening around you in nature, there's all kinds of things happening that have nothing to do with us. The ants don't care about us. The
Yeah.
ants are aware of us. And they've been around a lot longer than we have. And they're doing their thing. That's what nature is doing. Nature is doing its thing. We, I feel really strongly, we have a responsibility to be good stewards of this
Yeah.
incredible planet. And I look at someone like Bill Gates and I think, man, you are failing in that regard.
Yeah.
Your cronies, who are trying to get off the planet as quick as you can, what are you
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah.
When was the last time Bill Gates went outside into the forest, I wonder, and actually sat and was humbled by the amazing intricacy of what nature is? I would be really curious to know that. Bill Gates, if you're watching this, get in
Yeah.
touch. I want to have a conversation with you.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? There was a wonderful book. I'm just trying to think. I think it was apologies if I get it wrong, This Enchanted Life by Sharon Blackie. And she talked about the idea of not just going into nature, because I think that's the thing, isn't it? There's some it's a bit of our like hectic culture is that it becomes something to tick off a to-do list. So it's like, you're like, oh, I'm going into nature and I'm here in nature and I've got my headphones on listening to podcasts. If you're listening to us in nature, take us out and enjoy the world around you right now.
Exactly.
But it's, we sort of we need to separate from that hectic mindset as well, don't we? And it's like actually not just going into nature, but like actually, I don't know, I'm struggling for the word, like being in nature and just
Yeah.
sort of pausing, isn't it? And it's just actually experiencing it and the world around you. And rather than it being like, oh, I've got 10 minutes to walk through the nearest park and like, aren't I good? And I've connected with nature. And it's like actually there's a whole nother level to it than just sort of being there.
Well, here's a great exercise that I love to give to people, especially if they come back at me to say, well, I live in a big city. There's concrete everywhere. There's huge apartment buildings and skyscrapers, and there's trees that are stuck in concrete. Where do you want me to go? How do you want me to,
Yeah,
get connected to nature? Okay, fair enough. But what if you were to stand next to that tree that's encased in the concrete and put your hand on its bark and look up at its leaves, because it's just as alive as any tree in the forest is. I mean, it's got
yeah,
a few more challenges, different challenges than the trees in the forest do. But what if you were to do that? And what if you were to imagine the soil underneath the concrete, because it's still there, right? I mean, this is something that's a
yeah,
really good exercise for people who are walking on the concrete, who are in the middle of downtown London or downtown Toronto or wherever. Stop for a moment, put your feet on the ground, like really on the ground, feel through the soles of your shoes, the concrete, and then imagine the dirt
yeah,
that's underneath the concrete and all the organisms that are still living in that soil, in that dirt. And, given the way that time and nature work, if we were all suddenly blipped off the planet or out of existence, I'm sure there's apocalyptic movies about this, but if we were all just suddenly gone, within 10 to 20 years, all of our cities would be encased in nature. And we can see this when we look at the jungles in South America with LIDAR. I was watching an amazing documentary recently called, what was it called? Apocalyptic something or another. I mean, the name is quite,
yeah,
big. Basically, the host, he's looking at evidence. He's looking for evidence of an apocalyptic event that occurred about 12,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age. And there's a lot of geologic history, a lot of geologic research and evidence that points us in the direction that something major and catastrophic happened
yeah,
at that time. And what we can see when we use LIDAR, and LIDAR is a way of looking through the canopy of the forest, for example, or looking through the sand or the dirt to see forms that are underneath it by using radar. It's fascinating, actually. Anyways, what they've discovered is vast, vast city complexes and what they think to be religious centers underneath the existing Amazon jungle. And the only way for those to have been built is at the time that they were built, and they're being pushed back to 20,000 years ago, 30,000 years ago, so before the last ice age, is if that forest, the one that we know now, that we see now, it wasn't there at the time that these buildings were being built, at the time that these millions of people were living in civilizations, creating art, creating religion, creating all kinds of amazing things. The forest wasn't there as
Yeah,
those structures
I
were
think this
built.
is the amazing thing, isn't it? And it's sometimes like, and it goes back to your geology again, doesn't it? Of like, the story of like, some areas that we walk and it was like, this was a lake and it was a desert and then it's, now it's a woodland or a forest or, the seashore. And there is this whole, I think we as people we don't like change, like I think that's fair to say, like we like control. We don't like change, especially change that we haven't orientated, and even change that we have chosen for ourselves is tricky as well. And I think part of the challenge really now is actually ensuring that we have a space for nature alongside of us and with us. And I think that's really potentially where we've been failing, is it's been like we've got to push nature out and it's got to go literally to the periphery, and actually we
Mm,
need to find our way back to kind of living more in harmony with nature, inviting nature back into our lives, into our cities, into our just environments, really, it being an intrinsic part of our environment rather than something we want to eradicate. And I think I loved your like idea of walking up to a tree in a city, and I just felt like when you were talking, I just felt like in my heart I could just imagine this tree just being like, oh my goodness, someone's finally noticed me, like all of these hundreds of thousands of people who just scurry past me every day, and you've stopped to say hello. And it's just just the sort of like relief on his face of like being seen. Yeah,
yes, being connected with. I know it's these little things that we can do, right? So, and you and I were talking before we started about hope
yeah,
and really helping people to feel real deep and lasting hopefulness for the direction that we're going in. And when we think about how do we want to be interacting with nature, then it's our responsibility as citizens to insist that our governments put in legislation or put in laws that say there must be this much green space in
yeah,
any new construction. Right. And there's all these, I don't know if you're aware of this, but in the UK and Canada and Australia and New Zealand, these 15-minute neighborhoods are being introduced. And what I will say about them is that one of the things that is being insisted upon in the creation of these 15-minute neighborhoods is that there is green space,
yeah,
like a common green space that people can enjoy, which is so important. And, I say to people, look, even if you just go to the grocery store and you buy a little plant, because I don't know about in the UK, but here all the grocery stores have a little garden section, and you can buy a little 4-inch pot, and you can bring home a begonia or bring home
yeah,
a whatever else. And in nature, these are huge tropical plants, but we bring them
yeah,
into our houses, and they're these little things. But they help our air. They help clear the air in the rooms that we have them in. They help us sleep better. They absorb our energy for good or for bad. We can bring nature to us if we can't bring ourselves to nature. And
yeah,
even the smallest gesture like that will make a difference. I mean, I see the plant behind you. I've got a
yeah,
lot in my office here as well that I look at every day. Our house is full of plants inside and out. So there are things you can do. And what I love, this was something else that I read recently, that so in the US, there's areas that are considered to be urban deserts. They don't have a lot of green space. The grocery stores don't have a lot of fresh foods. It's a lot of
yeah,
prepackaged stuff. But what people are doing, what the people are doing, the people are yearning for some kind of connection, some kind of control or interaction with their food, some knowledge of where it comes from. So communities are coming together and they're taking these empty car lots or these abandoned building spaces and they're creating these urban oases of gardens.
Oh, I've seen this, and also urban farms as well, where they're actually growing
That's
produce, and
yeah.
yeah, it's amazing, some of them.
Yes, yeah. And for a lot of people, this isn't what they grew up with, but they did grow up with stories that their grandparents told them of what it was like to have a little plot of land and to have, a Liberty Garden, perhaps
Yeah.
during the war, or just that there was always an expectation that you would grow some of your own food. Now, if you're living in a high rise and you don't even have a balcony in that high rise, you don't have a space for that. But if you've got a community that is oriented in that kind of direction, then you can participate in that creation of that urban garden, that urban farming. And for most of these establishments, it's a combination of growing food and also growing plants for the joy of having them.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you go and sit and be a part of it, as well as watching where your food comes from and watching it grow. And children thrive in these kinds of environments because children are innately curious and they want to understand things. And it's just, to me, it's such an empowerment that the individual can have some kind of autonomy over the food that
Yeah.
they consume and that they put into their bodies. I think it's brilliant, and I would love to see more and more and more of that. And I feel like the pendulum is swinging in that way. I think people have been pushed far enough into concrete jungles and into concrete boxes, and we see this rise of chronic illness. And I know it's complicated; it's not just one thing, but it surely is something to do with the fact that we are so disconnected. So what can we do to change that? We can take those steps.
Well, I think I mean this brings us, we've talked a lot about geology, but this brings us sort of nicely into sort of the other aspect of your being, as it were. And that's around health. And I think there is, we are seeing, like, society has been getting sicker and sicker and sicker, not just physically but mentally as well. Like, we are really struggling. Like, whatever path we've been on is clearly not serving people to the best of our ability.
Mhm.
And there is a lot of mounting evidence, scientific studies that are really showing that our connection to nature is important. And I think that's the other side of what you do, is you work as a healer, multiple faceted healer, with, and one aspect of that is using plant medicine, isn't it? And that came through your own personal challenges with health, didn't it?
It did, yes. And again, because I grew up in a foraging family, I had that luxury, I would call it a luxury actually in our world right now, of being exposed to, whole foods, being exposed to natural foods, going out and picking them myself and foraging
Yeah.
for them myself. My parents were very health conscious. I mean, they weren't perfect by any means, but I grew up with homemade food, learning how to cook, being able to take that kind of responsibility for myself. But I did have a lot of health challenges that we couldn't figure out at the time. And it wasn't until I was in my 30s, I think, late 30s, even early 40s, and I was experiencing chronic issues that I had been for a long time. And I was going from specialist to specialist to specialist. And in our mainstream medicine, well, the specialists don't tend to talk to each other. The elbow
No,
doctor, not
sadly.
talking to the toe doctor. So I was never getting a holistic picture of what could be going on because we've segmented our human bodies and our human health into various specialties to our detriment. But I did go and see a naturopath at one point, and she listened to my litany of complaints and aches and pains and sores. And she said, "Have you ever heard of something called fibromyalgia?" I
Oh,
said,
wow. Okay.
"No, I haven't." And she said, "Okay, well, I'd like you to go home and do some research," which I love. I love doing research. I was all over that. She said, and then, come back for our next session and let's just see what you think. So I went home and I started researching fibromyalgia, and I checked every box.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, oh, thank goodness. I was so relieved. I mean, people
Yeah.
around me were saying, "Oh, no, no, you have fibromyalgia. This is terrible. This is terrible." And I'm saying, "No, no, no. This is amazing. I have something I can work with now."
Yeah. I think that's the hardest thing, isn't it? People who perhaps haven't dealt with a really sort of chronic health condition is just this relief of actually like kind of knowing what's wrong with you. And I suppose validation as well, because some quite often, you know, in women's health in particular, they are quite unvalidated with their symptoms. You know, it's sort of you might be making them up or yeah, probably
Yes.
exaggerating them at best. So yeah, so to it it is just it's quite freeing, isn't it, to actually be like, oh wow, that explains it. Now I can do something with that.
Exactly, exactly. And one of the things that my naturopath said to me at the time is the first thing that she said, the first thing I recommend you do is to remove gluten from your diet.
Okay.
Like, okay, gluten, that's wheat. Now, my older daughter, when she was well, I mean, her whole life, she's had severe food allergies. So she was already on a restrictive diet. I, as a consequence, was already on a restrictive diet, and I was having to learn how to cook and to bake, and I'm not a baker, um, with gluten-free and
Yeah.
dairy-free and all sorts of things, the things that she was allergic to. But I hadn't really done a deep dive into gluten and how pervasive it is in our society. And now the gluten over here, wheat over here is very different from wheat in Europe.
Yeah.
The wheat over here has been highly modified. It's been modified to be more glutinous, more sticky. And so what gluten is gluten is the sticky part, the mucilagenic part of wheat and of other things as well. And what it does to our bodies is it gets into our joints and it literally makes us sticky on the inside. And there's tons of research and evidence to validate. I mean, this is well known,
Yeah.
and lots of books have been written about it. Wheat belly is one that's really well known over here. So all of that is to say, I did a deep dive into gluten, learned a whole lot about it and about how it's been manipulated and how it's in absolutely everything. So even though I thought I was already mostly gluten free, I realized I wasn't. So I took it completely out of everything. And it was nothing short of a miracle. It was, to me, a miraculous healing because
Wow.
within 2 or 3 days of completely removing it from my body, I was a brand new woman.
Wow.
I was no longer this feeling like this 99-year-old unhealthy woman who couldn't get off the sofa and play with her two beautiful little girls. I was standing up straight. I had no pain. I had boundless energy. I could think clearly. My sex life improved. Maybe that's too much information, but for anybody out there who's struggling with fibromyalgia and you've been told there's nothing you can do about it, that's not true.
Yeah.
That's not true. There's a lot you can do about it. And one of the things you can do about it is your diet, right? Because anything that you put in your body that's inflammatory is going to create a whole host of problems. And we can now say very confidently that virtually every disease that we have categorized, we can attribute to inflammation in the body, somewhere in the body, in the brain, in the joints, in the intestines. And we know what causes that inflammation. We know it's diet. So it's not rocket science.
Yeah.
But it can take a big shift in a person's thinking. There could be food trauma that has to be resolved and healed. There could be lots of other traumas that require the healing of those traumas in order for the individual to feel like they deserve to have good health and
And
to have boundless energy.
I was just thinking as well, something that's quite important to perhaps share at this point is like I know it's sort of in mainstream medicine, fibromyalgia is untreatable, isn't it?
Mm.
It's, you know, this is something you're going to be labeled with and you are going to suffer with for life. And I just wanted to sort of touch on that because I think it whilst like we talked about how freeing it felt for you to get that sort of diagnosis and validation of what that is, it's important to not sort of get attached to the label that you're given as well and sort of be like, oh, this is it, this is, and you almost over identify with it. It's like, hi, I'm Megan, I've got fibromyalgia, and it's all like
Or even
and
more, I have fibromyalgia and I'm Megan. I mean, that even
yeah,
puts the diagnosis in front of the person as opposed to
yeah,
it simply being part of your experience. But what I tell people if this ever, when this comes up in conversation is I was given a diagnosis of fibromyalgia. I was
right,
given it. right? I don't say I have
Yeah.
fibromyalgia or I am fibromyalgia. I was given a diagnosis. The diagnosis made sense to me. It empowered me to want to make changes in my life and to understand the reason why, right? And so this comes back to the work that I do as a healer. I want to understand the reason why a person is showing up with either mental illness or agitation or physical illness or discomfort. Where's the source of it? Because what modern medicine does, and it does a lot of really good things, but what it also does is it only treats the symptoms, and it treats the
Yeah.
symptoms almost all the time in Western medicine with a prescription, with a pharmaceutical, a
Yeah.
chemical that has been isolated from a plant or something else in nature, a plant, I mean, a tree, a seaweed, whatever. A component has been isolated, made into a medication, and then given as if everybody is the same, right? One size fits all medicine. When you step away from that model, that medical model, what I know happens for myself and what I see happen for my clients is a return to autonomy
Yeah.
and a return to understanding our bodies. We've been talking about nature and the whole, like what is outside of us, but how many people even know where their liver is or understand what their kidneys do? Or what's the pancreas? Or why do you have an appendix or not in my case? So,
But
um,
it is, isn't it? We've just been so conditioned in society to like, particularly around our bodies, I think to give away our power and understanding of it. We're not, we're not sort of validated when we go and say, well, I'm having this, I'm thinking maybe this is, they're sort of like, oh, yeah, no, you didn't do your doctor's degree, so I'll give you an answer. And it's it is so important. I think it's something I'm really passionate about. And I like what you mentioned there about this, whether you want to call them alternative or holistic or complementary. I mean, you could call it the original if you're really being honest about medicine, aren't you? But it's
yes.
the fact that it does look at the whole, which is, the concept of holistic. And, you're not broken down into these parts. Someone will sit and listen to everything that, you're sharing because it's all linked. It's all important. If you've got a pain in your shoulder, it could be linked to the pain in your toe, or, the fact that you're feeling depressed when you get up in the morning. And it is so important to understand that and to advocate. I think that's the real thing is, people need to start advocating for their own health and educating themselves and speaking to people like you who have walked this path themselves.
Absolutely. And as you're saying that, I mean, something that's coming to mind is that, especially in the last 5 years, but really since probably the 70s or 80s, even holistic, like the information about holistic health and healing has been censored. In fact, actually, let's just go right back down to the Rockefellers
Yeah.
in the United States and what Rockefeller did with the teaching of medicine. And I won't go into the whole history. People can look it up for themselves if they're able to find the information, because unfortunately, what happens is that the interests of the big pharmaceutical companies is in opposition to the interests of someone like myself who wants to teach people that the herbs in their Italian herb mix is actually medicine.
Yeah.
It's getting more and more challenging to find the information online because of the heavy censorship. And I'm not making this up, people. It's very, very real. And you can find out the history of it, of doctors who've had their license revoked because they're advocating vitamin D.
Yeah.
And that's contrary to what their College of Physicians and Surgeons is telling them that they're allowed to tell people. This happened in Canada in March of 2020.
Yeah, I was going to say I remember during COVID I shared a post on Facebook about just taking extra vitamin C. Now, that's something that I've grown up with. It's like when you're under the weather, it's all, boosting your vitamin C, whether it's, taking a supplement or having, more fruit and vegetables that are higher in vitamin C. And my post got slapped with like, fake fake news kind of or whatever it was that they had at the time. The I can't even remember the the exact terminology that we had at the time, but Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's very true that, everything is very controlled. We have this amazing like interconnected world of technology, but it is being very highly censored and also curated for you as well, I think is the other aspect of it of it is quite difficult. You said yourself you love research. I'm very similar. So, I like digging through the layers. I studied history a while ago and we always talked about, having multiple sources and then comparing them and really sort of, picking the threads and things. And it is really important to really educate yourself. I think that's really the key, isn't it?
It is. And what I would say to people who are concerned about medical censorship and just the censorship of any kind of information that could be empowering to us as the individual citizen that may take us away from the mainstream medical model is go to the secondhand bookstores and find yourself the out of print books from the 50s, 40s, 60s, even earlier than that, that have to do with natural medicine or have to do with foraging out in the wilds. There's a wonderful book I grew up with called Stalking the Wild Asparagus. I don't even know if it's in
I
print
love the
anymore.
name. That sounds
I know, isn't that great?
fantastic.
There was another one my parents had called something about the wayside herbs, and it was all about looking along the sides of the roads. You probably wouldn't do that today with modern vehicles, but basically the idea is, in the wild places, even within an urban setting, you're going to find medicinal plants because all plants have medicine. Those older books, they contain such important information that is becoming more and more challenging to find. And one of the things that I would really encourage people to do is to question. You remember that healthy skepticism I was talking about? Why is it becoming more difficult for us to
Yeah,
find this information? Who is being threatened by my knowledge of vitamin D and how vitamin D is found in mushrooms? And how if I go out and forage and I go out and forage for my mushrooms and then I put my mushrooms out in the sun before I cook them or dry them to store them, they're going to absorb a year's worth of vitamin D.
oh wow.
And
Yeah,
when I then eat those mushrooms as part of my cooking, I get that my body gets that vitamin D. Who is threatened by that?
yeah,
That's a really important question. And then, when we go back to that hopefulness, once you have that knowledge, once you've asked those really critical thinking questions, which most people don't, but I'm really encouraging people to do so, you can then lobby your politicians. You can then lobby, the people who are making the rules. You can gather people around you who feel similarly, and you can change the way in which information is being disseminated.
yeah,
Also find those underground movements, and there's lots of them, especially over the last 5 years, of people who are banding together to share this information because it's so important that we understand how our bodies work, what vitamins are, what hormones are, how they're being impacted by our environment and the things that are being put into the environment, and most importantly, what we can do about it, because that's where that feeling of hopefulness comes from, is when we understand that there is something that we can do about it. And it starts with the individual. It starts with the changes that the
yeah,
individual is willing to make. And that starts with the way the person is thinking, right?
no,
So somebody
yeah,
comes, they've got physical ailments and they want to, change their diet or they want to add something new into their lifestyle, or they've got that shoulder pain you were talking about. I'm not looking at their symptoms first. I want to hear their story first
yeah, okay,
because the symptoms are a reflection of their story,
yeah,
of their life experiences, how they've experienced them, where they're holding them in their body, and what they're telling themselves. If a person says over and over again, I'm shouldering so much responsibility, guess where a symptom is going to show up? It's going to
yeah.
show up in your shoulders, right?
Yeah, and I think I love that of like these little sayings that we have, that have like kept through life, haven't they? And things like that is, like we're carrying the weight of the world, for example, is another great one, isn't it? Of, these are little things that are little tells of what you're feeding and what you're creating. And I think I just the other thing well, there's a couple of things. One is that I feel like we're co-creating with the earth, and I feel like that's where the power of like herbal and medicine and sort of natural medicine is realizing that we are in this two-way relationship with the earth and the plants, and they do have incredible wisdom as well as healing for us. And I think that's for me is this whole idea of co-creation really is at the root of what we need to get back to. But I just want to cover. I know we've been talking quite a while already, and I would just want to cover that you do have as well an amazing oracle card deck, and I would like you to to have a chance to share a bit about that as well, because I also think that that is an important message for people who perhaps are starting out in, well, it doesn't have to be just starting out at any point in their journey, is learning to kind of trust themselves in a different way. And I feel that sort of where how I use oracle cards is a way to kind of help me sort of communicate with my higher self, my inner knowing, use your own own word for it. But would you like to share about that? Because it is a lovely, lovely oracle card deck, and I'd love you to just share about that and oracle cards in general.
Thank you. Yeah, I would absolutely love to. And for me, the my connection to nature is part of where these oracle cards came from. My deck of oracle cards comes from. As I was going through separating out from my 23-year marriage and all that that entails, I said to the universe one day, just show me a sign, give me a sign that when I see it, I'll know that I'm following my heart and I'm doing the best I can and I'm in integrity in the best that I know how for the decisions I have to make moving
Yeah.
forward. Yeah. And the universe, in its infinite wisdom and its sense of humor, started showing me hearts in nature. Okay, I get it. That's hysterical. But it was also very powerful. And I feel that our higher self speaks to us in ways that makes the most sense to us. So of course it's going to be hearts because I love hearts,
Yeah.
and it's going to be in nature because I love nature. So I started to take photographs of these hearts as I would see them. They would be little rocks on the beach, or they would be big clouds in the sky that were shaped like hearts, or they would be the roots of trees in the shapes of hearts. They were literally everywhere. And each time I saw them, I would say, thank you. Okay, I can calm myself down now. I'm doing the best I can, basically. And so I allowed the symbol of the heart in nature to be my guide as I moved through this experience. And then when I came out of the experience, I mean, I'm still in it, but I was now in my own home, and my daughters were with me, and they were going back and forth and all of that. And I was taking my healing work to another level because it now needed to put food on the table.
Yeah.
It became my full-time work. And one of my clients said to me, you really need to put these hearts out in the world. People need to see them. They need to make that connection. So I did. I put them on Facebook. That love-hate relationship with Facebook. But anyways, I put them out on Facebook and started receiving the most amazing messages from people. How because I had shared a photo of a heart cloud, they started looking for heart clouds, or they started looking on the beach for heart rocks, and people were sharing their photographs with me of what they were finding. And so we were creating this amazing web of heart connectivity. Now, for oracle cards, I've worked with oracle cards for over 30 years, since I was a teenager. And really quickly, oracle cards and tarot cards are similar but different. Tarot is a more ancient form of divination, but more of just seeking advice and guidance from the messages and symbols that are on a deck of tarot cards. And every deck of tarot cards has the same number of cards, has the same symbols on it. Oracle cards are different. They're more organic. They can be anything, any theme, any message, any number of cards, any way of presenting them. They work well together, tarot and oracle, or you can do them completely separately. And for anybody who has been taught from a religious perspective that these things are evil or scary or shouldn't be used or interfere with your relationship with God, please recognize that they're just pieces of paper. They're pieces of paper that have words and images on them. That's it. In and of themselves, they have no power. The magic is when you work with them. And like you were saying, it's that opportunity when you work with an oracle card or a deck to take time out from the busyness of your life, ask a question that you are seeking guidance around, and let that guidance come in from your higher self, your own consciousness, because we're far wiser than we ever give ourselves credit for. But these tools, which is what they are, these tools help us to focus. So my deck, the focus is on the heart and on healing the heart. So this is, whoops, kind of shiny there. And it comes in this beautiful hard
Yeah.
box.
And it's called the Heart's Journey
And
for
it's called the Heart's Journey. Yeah, it's Healing Hearts, Oracle Cards, and Guidebook. And so in the deck, you get the guidebook. And in the guidebook, I share my story. And this is something unique in the world of Oracle cards and tarot cards. I very rarely come across an author who shares their story as to why they produced this deck of Oracle cards or tarot. What was the motivation and what was coming from themselves that they put into their writing, into their product. So I'm very vulnerable, and I share what was happening and why these hearts were important, and what the struggles and challenges were that I was going through as I was navigating this separation, and with two little children and all of that. So there's the story is in there, and then I also teach people how to work with Oracle cards, the different ways that you can connect with them. You do a 1-card pull, or you can get really elaborate and do a 12-card pull, 1 card for every month. There's lots of different ways that you can work with them. So I share that in the deck or in the book, and then each card has its own page. So this is what one of the cards looks like. This is what one of the cards looks like. And then there's a write-up of more information that was coming to me as I took that photo, or as I was in that stage, in that phase. And then there's also a journal. So you've got the ability to, write in what your card pull was, or what your grocery list is for that day.
What your messages were, that, connecting back to yourself and what wisdom you have.
That's right, exactly. Your own interpretation and understanding of what the messages are as they come to you. And then you even get a pen and a bookmark, so you can, where
there's no excuse for not writing in the journal then. You can't be like, oh, I couldn't find a pen.
That's right. And then the cards come in their own little box and little deck, and there's 42 of them. And each one, so this one's called Wounded Heart Heal. I don't know if you can see that with the reflection.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
Okay. And so what this is not eucalyptus, this is what I said last time, not eucalyptus, arbutus bark. So arbutus is a tree that is native to my part of the world, and it has this beautiful smooth bark, and people love to carve in it, which is unfortunate. But what the tree is able to do is to heal that, but it leaves a scar behind.
So you get this sort of raised effect. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And so this is a heart with an S next to it. So I interpreted that as, hearts. This is heart, where the healing hearts comes from. And then on the back of each card, there's a short message, a short channeled message that then we explore deeper when we go into the guidebook. And this one says, so this is Wounded Heart Healed. And it says, creatively express your heart wounds as a way to healing. In sharing your story, you connect to others and create beauty. Find the beauty in your wounding, right? Which is profound.
Yeah, it's just giving me goosebumps. Yeah. It's beautiful.
Me too. And I wrote it, but every time I read this, any of the cards, every time I read them, I have that connection back to the journey of healing. And we can't be on that journey unless we're connected to our hearts, right? That's where it begins. Because I believe personally that every moment that we are alive, we are aligned with our heart. And if there's anything that's getting in the way of our relationship with our heart, and most of us, there's certainly going to be something. There's going to be that first heartbreak. And that first heartbreak might not be the first crush that didn't pan out for you. It could be the first time that you got yelled at as a little tiny child. Your heart broke in that moment because the love and the trust that you had for the person who's looking after you is suddenly brought into question when you're being yelled at and you don't know why. And even if you think you know why, you don't know why, because you're being yelled at because your parent or the adult had something else going on in their lives. It actually wasn't about you. But again, that brings us back to our own stories and how powerful they are, and how we can change our relationship with the way that we are experiencing those stories as the foundation for healing. And what these oracle cards do is they give you that moment to connect with something that is possibly going on in your heart. So I'll shuffle the deck and I'll pull out another one just to give a different perspective.
I love that idea of story, and I think it comes right back to the beginning of our conversation about geology as well. being the story of the earth. And the fact that, we do have the power to change our story. Like, it's only written, we're only at this chapter. Like there's a whole
Mhm.
lot of chapters still to come that we haven't been written. They're like your journal with the blank pages that
That's right.
you can write. We can write the future. And I think that that's the important thing, isn't it? Is it's like, we are at this point where we do need to come back into our hearts, because when we come back into our hearts, we do feel this connection. I mean, like that's true for me anyway, at least, is that's how I feel connected when I'm in nature, when you're not speaking the same language, but you do feel the energy in your heart. And it's, and that's what the world needs right now. That cliche, isn't it? The world just needs more love. It needs more love. It needs more hearts. It needs, your heart to sort of come
Mm.
back online, as it were, and just, heal your own story. And together, as we all heal our own stories, or begin to heal them, it doesn't have to be a completed work, that,
Mhm.
you
That's
know,
right.
we are creating this healing story across the world.
Absolutely. And as I said before, it starts with the individual. It starts with the individual acknowledging that there is a problem, or there is an issue, or there is a challenge in their life, and then recognizing that they have the power to do something about it. And that fundamentally starts with the way in which they're thinking about whatever it is that's going on. And what I really want people to understand is that the only thing that you can change in your life is the way in which you are thinking about your life,
Yeah.
right? You don't have control over the Bill Gateses of the world. You don't have control over the mining companies. You don't have control over the politicians. You don't have control over anyone in your life, I believe. But what you do have control, where you do have autonomy, is in the way that you are thinking about yourself and about your life. And the brilliant thing is, you can change your mind.
Yeah.
You're the only one who can. No one else can change it for you.
Yeah.
You can change your mind. And when you change your mind and you make a decision, you make a choice about living your life differently, or doing some healing work, or just recognizing that your heart is vulnerable and it needs support, so many things can shift, and they can shift immediately. I've watched it happen. I've seen it in myself. I know how powerful that the mind is, to be able to make a choice and then have the change. And then you can be the change that you want to see in the world.
Yeah. I just want to just let everyone know that I will have in the description links for you. But would you just like to share as well how people can get in touch with you, how they can find out more about what you do, just so that that they know how to find you if they've been hopefully hugely inspired and enjoyed this conversation as much as I have.
Absolutely. And actually, where I want to start with that is that I have a gift for your audience. I have a gift for anyone who's watching this podcast, my audience or your audience or whomever, which is an evergreen coupon for 15% off the Heart's Journey. So
Oh, beautiful. Thank you.
I'll send you, if I haven't already, I'll send you the link for that, and then people can just click on that link. It will go through to a sales cart page, and they'll be able to get 15% off. I will say, at the moment, our postal system is on strike in Canada. Now, I know 6 months
Bless
from now, hopefully that won't be the case if someone's watching this 6 months from when we
you.
put it out. But at the moment, so if you do make your purchase in the next little while, I'm storing up everybody's purchases so that I can get them in the post
Bear
as
with
soon
us. Yeah, yeah,
as possible. Yes,
yeah.
one of those things that's not in my control, right?
Yeah.
uh, anyway, so that's one gift that I would like to give. And then places where people can find me, they can find me through my website, which is meganedge.ca, and all of my services are listed in there. More information about me and the way that I show up in the world. All of my podcasts are there, as well as articles that I've written, blogs that I've written. So lots of information there. You can also experience my work on my YouTube channel, and there's over 300 videos
Oh,
of
wow.
talks that I've given, workshops that I've given, classes that I give, my own video podcast, which is called Magic, Mystery, and Medicine. It's been on hold for a few years, but there's lots of great episodes there. My radio show that I used to do. So lots and lots of ways that you can see me and work with some of my exercises, some of the ways that I help my clients, and that's a great way kind of feel me out and see if I'm a fit for you. If I'm not, that's great. Someone else will be. And if I am, awesome. Then reach out to me through the website. And then social media, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook, the love-hate relationship, Instagram, similar things. I'm trying to put out information on those social medias that they will allow, that is still empowering for people. But I do have my posts taken down on a regular basis because I'm sharing about herbal medicine or foraging or being out in the forest, whatever it is.
The challenge is real, Paul. That's right.
That's right. But you can find me there, and then you can reach out to me through, Messenger, and we can have a conversation about what's really going on and how plants can really help you and all of those sorts of things. So
yeah. Oh, well, beautiful. Well, I think unless there's anything else you'd particularly like to share before we end and wrap up, it would be lovely if you would pull another of your oracle cards for us, and we can share that with people as a sort of final message for them.
Absolutely. Well, there is a card that came up, and it's this one here. It's called Heart Space.
And
it's a little tiny heart rock. Yeah. Just sitting on the sand. No really other rocks around it. And the message of Heart Space is that there is a need to create space for yourself and your heart at this time. Healthy love allows each person their distinctive creativity, humor, and personality to shine. Create some space to become clear on who you are inside and outside of your relationships.
Oh my goodness. It couldn't have been more perfect, could it? I mean, that's what I love about oracle cards, is they just have this sort of divine timing, don't they, of just the most beautiful way of crystallizing basically everything we've just talked about. And I love that, and I love your whole hearts in nature. I actually look for hearts in nature as well, and I think if people wanted to go and look, I'm pretty sure on my social media, on my Instagram, I have somewhere a picture of this big ancient oak tree that I sort of steward gently in the field where my horses live. And he developed this huge, I mean, it's sort of we're like 20-30 centimeter heart opening that like chipped away in his bark. And it's just this absolutely perfect heart. And and it sort of stops people in their tracks, and they'll be like sort of talking to me, and then they'll sort of be like, oh my goodness, the oak tree has a huge heart on it. And what's really interesting is that it sort of appeared about 2 or 3 years ago, and I mean, he's hundreds of years old, and he's just like recently has shown his heart, as it were. So if anyone listening has found some hearts in nature, please tag us as well on social media, share them, and let us know, because we will appreciate them with you.
Yes, absolutely. What I love about finding hearts in nature is that nature made that.
Yeah.
And nature made that heart. And that to me is so profound, that as a species, we identify with the shape of a heart. I mean, that shape's been around since prehistoric times. We see it on cave paintings, wall paintings from 10,000, 14,000, 15,000 years ago. It's still with us. That symbol is so profound, and it's in nature. Yeah. And we are a part of nature. So it's in us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's been absolutely magical, Megan. I've really, really loved speaking with you today. I can't thank you enough. And I will make sure to have all those links available to everyone in the show notes and the description, so that they can connect with you. But thank you again so much for sharing your wisdom and some of your story as well. And I hope that we maybe get a chance to connect again in the future as well, because I know that there's a lot more of your story and wisdom that you could share with everyone.
Well, thank you. I would love that. And thank you for being the bright light that you are in the world, and holding space for people's positive relationships with nature and with healing. It's really important, the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think it is important at this time to remember that there is hope, and to forge these deeper, more loving relationships both with the world around us and with ourselves. And for me, nature is really a true portal to that.
Beautiful, beautifully said. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Megan.
Thank you for having me. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for listening to the Nurtured by Nature podcast. I truly hope this conversation has brought some hope and inspiration into your life. I would love to have these messages ripple out across the world. So if you can, please share this episode with your friends, leave a review on your favourite podcast player, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. I would love to hear from you, so please feel free to connect with me on the links provided in the podcast description. But most importantly, thank you so much for being a part of this journey with me. But don't forget to simply get out there and enjoy the natural world.